The U.S. Fed Reserve will likely need to raise interest rates at an upcoming meeting, according, of course, to Fed Chair Janet Yellen. Now, she flagged considerable uncertainty over economic policy under the Trump administration. She also said delaying rate increases could leave the Fed's policymaking committee behind the curve and eventually lead them to hike rates quickly, which she said could cause a recession. Of course, she said this while she met with Congress leaders today. But let's get more insight into that meeting with the U.S. Senate. Harry Horton now joins us in New York. Harry, welcome to the show. Now, of course, Yellen was certainly in the hot seat today against what some see as a hostile Republican Congress. Now, give us the highlights of today's testimony.
Well, it was a pretty lengthy session up on Capitol Hill here in Washington, D.C. She was grilled by senators for almost 3 hours in total. She spoke about interest rates, gave some more clues about when we might see an interest rate rise here in the United States. She said that growth in the United States at the moment was moderate, as she described it. She said that the mood, in her view, amongst businesses here in the United States at the moment was improving, but the rising US dollar was hurting manufacturing slightly. Now, she urged members of Congress to focus on long-term growth and to come up with a sustainable plan to try and tackle US national debt, which currently stands at $19.2 trillion. So overall, a largely positive view from Janet Yellen on the state of the US economy, but plenty of caution from her as well.
Now, give us more insight into her tone while she met with the Congress today. Of course, she said that she probably will be raising those interest rates. What was her tone like?
Well, she said that she thought that interest rate rise would happen at some point later this year. She didn't go any further on her previous suggestion that there would be 3 interest rate rises this year. And she also didn't tell us whether the planned interest rate rise would be at a March meeting or at a meeting in June. She did say that waiting too long to raise interest rates would be unwise as economic growth continues and inflation rises. And she said that the fact that the new US President Donald Trump still hadn't given great detail on what his economic policy would be means that the Federal Reserve at the moment is unable to react and try to predict how the economy might react to any proposals from the new US president.
And Harry, did we see her address the fact that Trump's administration has pledged to undo that post-crisis banking rules that they set up, the Dodd-Frank, of course? Did she address that today?
Yes, she was grilled about that from senators from both the Republican Party and from the Democratic Party. So from the Democrats, the Senator Elizabeth Warren, she quizzed Janet Yellen on Trump's claims that Dodd-Frank was a disaster. And she also asked about his plans to dismantle it. She said, is it true, as Donald Trump claims, that banks are unable to lend anymore because of Dodd-Frank? Janet Yellen said that actually since 2010, loans from banks were up 75%. She said our banks have thrived since we passed Dodd-Frank. The Republicans on the committee, they asked whether Dodd-Frank had undermined lending to small businesses. And Janet Yellen did concede that some lenders, particularly community banks, have been held back by the Dodd-Frank regulations.
Now, looking forward, what are the chances that we'll see the U.S. Congress sort of reform the powers and certainly the governance of the U.S. Fed or of the central bank going forward? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, difficult to say. The Republicans have been pretty critical of the Federal Reserve over the past few years, in particular because of the weak economy. They think that the Federal Reserve hasn't reacted well enough to try and boost growth here in the United States. The economy at the moment is a fairly good position. That means that reform is less likely from Congress. The Democrats are also not particularly keen on reform either, and the Republicans have a very slim majority in Congress. So it looks like reform is unlikely from that point of view. When it comes to Donald Trump, he has both criticised Janet Yellen during the election campaign and then later praised her during the election campaign. So difficult to see where he stands on this issue as well, as with much of his economic policy at the moment. So hard to say, but the clues from today would be that any imminent reform looks unlikely.
Well, many thanks, Harry, for those insights. Harry Horton joining us there in New York.